To kind of start things off, my name is Dr. Brandon Meckelburg. I am originally from Central Wisconsin. I went to dental school at Marquette University in Milwaukee. And then after dental school finished up, I went down to Chicago, practiced for a little bit there. And now I am a multi-practice owner in North Florida. My offices span as far east as Tallahassee and as far west as Destin. So we're kind of all along the panhandle of North Florida.
So Dr. Meckelberg, so you mentioned you from Central Wisconsin, you went to school in Milwaukee. Did you want to move down to Florida, or kind of talk about how that path led you down there? And then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So initially I started with Aspen in Illinois. I was practicing just outside of the city of Chicago in an office there. And shortly after starting with Aspen in that location, things had gone well and lined up the right way. And I had met a few individuals throughout my early journey with mentorship and really my growth path. And early on, I expressed that I wanted to be a practice owner. I wanted to be able to grow, but I knew I also had to build my clinical skill set and be able to build a foundational piece of really that really the abilities to be able to treat patients the right way and confidently. And so once I was able to build that up in a short time frame, they offered me an opportunity in North Florida, which was something that I didn't really ever think about prior, but it was somewhere where there was a really high patient demand. There were not a lot of providers in the area, and it was an office that was somewhat struggling at the time. So I wanted to kind of take on that challenge. I knew that there was growth opportunity, not just in that office, but throughout that whole market. And so I made the move to Tallahassee without really ever having been there before, which was a little scary at first, but shortly after realized that it was one of the best decisions I ever made. I loved North Florida right away. The people were so friendly. The weather was definitely a big plus coming from the Midwest. But getting into an office that at the time had struggled, we changed the mentality and we changed the culture in the office. And then gradually over the span of the last, 5-6 years, that's what we've done. We've gone from office to office and taken over typically practices that just needed some leadership. And we've come in and really provided that in those offices and filled the gaps or really added people to those teams that were high character individuals that were driven, wanted to work hard, wanted to have a good time and enjoy being at work at the same time. And that's kind of how we've built the foundational pieces of these offices.
Well, that's awesome. So you mentioned setting up that clinical foundation. So can you talk about, fresh out of school, how was your mentorship at that time? Because I know in the last 5 or 6 years, as a company, we've invested in the mentorship program, but what did your mentorship look like 5 years fresh out of school in Illinois?
Yeah. So it's definitely changed a lot from where it is now to what it was 5-6 years ago. For the good, definitely for the positive. But even 5-6 years ago, though, I came in and was just so anxious to learn everything. And I expressed that early on. And that was one thing that I'm super appreciative of, was that Aspen lined me up with individuals that really embodied what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be. They connected me with doctors that were multi-practice owners that I could really learn not just the clinical pieces from them, which they offered and taught. I learned many things from them on that side, but also the business aspect of how do I run a practice? How do I make it successful? How do I really make sure that these offices, it makes sense to be an owner? Because I think there is a big difference between being a great dentist and being a great owner. Being a great dentist, you can come in and you can treat patients all day and can do the right thing and make the right decisions and really help to facilitate, a great team and a great culture in an office. But as an owner, sometimes you have to make difficult decisions. And as an owner, you have to be a leader for your office. You have to inspire your team members. And really that's kind of what I tried to pick up from working with these individual owners that I did. These guys really had nothing at stake for them. I had everything for me. I was trying to soak everything up I could. And really out of the goodness of their heart and the kindness of their heart, they gave me these tools to be able to go out and do it on my own. And the cool thing about it is full circle. Now those individuals have become some of my close friends. And they're guys that, I can call up if I have a question about anything when it comes to offices. And now full circle, they may even call me about different things. So it's really a unique experience. And I think the mentorship piece was something for me that I don't think I could have found anywhere else.
So now thinking like an owner, and you have all these doctors that work for you, what's your mentorship style? Like, how do you prepare a new grad? And, hopefully owners across the country are kind of using some of these same tips and tricks that we're developing, but what are specifically you doing to make your associates, your lead doctors successful in their positions?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the very first things is making sure that your mentor, or in my case scenario, the doctor that's coming in, with myself being the mentor, is someone that we really get along well. Having that piece where it's someone that you just messed with and you can trust in your offices, they have not necessarily the same personality, but you do see eye to eye and you enjoying being around each other. I think that's a huge piece. And then from there, I think some of the big aspects that have allowed these docs to be really successful early on is they come in and they have a sense of humility where they know that they don't know everything. Coming out of school, obviously we have the basics and the foundational pieces, but realistically they keep that humility, but they also are super eager to learn and ready to be go-getters. So I think it's it's a happy medium. You have to have confidence and be able to speak to patients and be confident in what you're doing clinically, but at the same time, have the humility and the coachability to be able to really take constructive criticisms and be able to turn them into a positive light. And so that's where I've seen these candidates that I brought in, that I've seen have really run with things and been the most successful, I should say. Those are the ones that really, they soak it up. It's different everywhere. I think one of the unique things about it is that Aspen, it's an overarching family that kind of everyone is a part, right? Or part of, right? But the unique thing about it is that every office is owned by a different owner. So you're going to get a different experience in every office that you go in. And that also goes for mentorship. So I can speak to what I do, and really the basis of what I try to do for mentorship is I want to give the doctors that come in their independence, but I want to give them really the tools and the ability to run forward, feel confident in what they're doing, and provide them with kind of the resources that, that hopefully they don't make some of the mistakes early on that I did. I think it's really important that a mentor be someone that can teach you to, push yourself and strive forward and do great things, but at the same time, not tell you exactly what to do and what not to do. Giving you that full autonomy so you can make those decisions on your own, I think is the best way to be able to learn and be able to move forward in the first place.
We've discussed on the mentorship, I think we went over a lot of it. You mentioned a lot of great points. You mentioned you made a few mistakes. Lastly, on mentorship, what are some things you wish you knew coming out of school that you know now that would have helped you prepare you for those first couple of years out of school before you became an owner and moved to North Florida?
Man. So interestingly enough, the first week or two that I have any of my new doctors come on, it's kind of joking in the sense that I call it boot camp, but that's basically what it is. It is real world crash course, like 1 to 2 weeks of like, this is actual dentistry. Like, this is all the stuff they teach you in school, and you can apply a lot of that knowledge, but in the real world, there's things that are just different. And there's definitely pieces that I had to learn from making those mistakes. I think one of the biggest ones for me, which was really, really difficult to get over, and I still struggle with some days, but that is that we're not going to be able to please every patient that walks in the door. And that was something that to my core bothered me for the first few years that I practiced, because even refractory patients that came in that I like, normally now when I look back, I'm like, oof, no. We don't want to get started on that. Back then I'd be like, oh, let's take it on, we can fix it. And so that's something that I try to teach my doctors, is that realistically we can do a lot of great things and be able to help so many people, but we also can only do really what our patients allow us to do. And so we have to be smart with the patients that we dive in with, because realistically, when we do a lot of these procedures, we're married to these patients. And so that's something that I've learned the hard way, that not everybody is going to be happy with what you do, but as long as you're giving the best effort you can to provide them with the best care possible and put them in the best situation, at that point, then it's kind of on them. So it's been a learning journey for myself, and hopefully, most of my doctors end up learning that, not by experience necessarily, but from kind of catching it early on.
Oh, I think that's a great, just from my experience in working in the offices. Yeah, I mean, that's something that's really hard, just at our cores of being, providers and in the working with the patients. So one question that's already came in, and I want to get to it. They asked what city in Wisconsin that you're from, and how many offices do you own before we get into ownership?
Yeah, so I'm originally from a really, really small town called Watoma. It is just outside of Oshkosh. It's smack dab in the middle of the state. We had literally one traffic light. It was 2,000 people. It was a tiny little town. But then I lived in Milwaukee for a long time, so that's kind of where home base was for me. But now in Florida, so I have 4 offices. We're opening our 5th coming this summer, and it's been a gradual process. So basically, almost every year, a little bit less than that, we've been opening a new office, or I've been taking over an existing practice.
Okay, so on ownership, so let's go back a little bit. So what made you to decide to join Aspen Dental versus private practice or maybe another DSO? And then why did you decide ownership was the right path for you after being with Aspen Dental?
Yeah, so I think it's twofold. The big thing for me was, well, I'll start by saying, when I came out of school, I didn't think I would touch a DSO with a 10-foot pole. I had great friends that were involved with it, but I just didn't know that it was right for me. And so I got into an office, which I would recommend is the most important thing, to actually go in person and spend time in a practice. That was the most eye-opening experience to me, because my background's in business and economics. I love numbers, but I also love the healthcare side and the ability to really help people with your hands and the clinical portion. And so Aspen's very unique in that you can do one, as in just the clinical side, or you can infuse both together. And that was something to me that was really interesting early on, that they expressed, is like, if you want to learn about the business, we can help you and give you the resources to do so. If you just want to become an amazing dentist, we can also give you the resources to do so. And so I thought to myself, like that to me sounded great. I thought about going into private practice, but the hard thing about private practice is realistically, to get started in private practice, you're starting kind of from the bottom up. And even beside that, if you're working in an office that's existing, so you're not doing a de novo, you're going to start as an associate, and sometimes you work as an associate for years and years and years, and just eventually to hope to buy that office from that owner. Whereas with Aspen, it was not necessarily a direct path and here's the keys, but it was very much so. It was clearly outlined that if you do well and you want to grow and you are willing to move to different locations, there will be opportunities. And to me, that was really encouraging. It was also, to me, really interesting that you could own multiple locations. And unlike other DSOs, Aspen does offer you 100% ownership of your practice. And then on top of that, other offices. You don't have to stay in your one location. So for myself right now, because I own 4 and soon to be 5 offices, I'm constantly traveling. So I may be mainly in one office 1 to 2 days a week, or maybe even 3 days a week for bigger surgeries and consultations with patients. But the other days of the week, I'm traveling to my other locations to spend time with my doctors, to be able to spend time with my teams. And I think that to me was really rewarding, because I can not only be in one office and be helping patients with my own hands, but I can be teaching other doctors to be doing the same thing and affecting more and more lives on an exponential scale.
Wow, that's interesting. I think we've talked about that a little bit, but that's the first time I've heard you explain it like that. So thank you for that. Now, did you start as an associate, and then after, like, how long, and then what kind of changed in your mind where you were like, I'm ready for the next step?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, Aspen was much different back in the day, 5, 6 years ago. I started as actually a lead dentist in a practice. I came in and my training was a little bit longer than what's normal. I think I ended up actually training for probably about almost 2 months. But I worked at the time with who I had said before, like some of the owners that I really look up to, I still do. And they had extremely high levels of success. And I just tried to pull what I could from what they were doing to be able to bring that back. And so the office that I worked in for a short period of time up in Illinois. It was very successful, thankfully, for the time that I was there. And so I think that kind of built up a little bit of a track record early on that they wanted to approach me about an opportunity. And like I said, it wasn't like they said, here you go, this office is yours to buy. When I moved to Florida, but they said, this is an opportunity. And if you really come in there and kick butt and really show what you can do, there's going to be opportunity for not just ownership, but multi-practice growth.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you moved to Florida not as the owner. So you moved down there, and you were just confident enough in your skills to say, hey, I believe in what I'm doing. I have a great foundation from the mentorship you received in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
So you go down there, you, I guess, do really well with the community down there. You buy the practice. What was the hardest part about that process? And then from that one practice, what are some of the things or challenges you've seen going from 1 to 4 and 5 this summer?
Yeah. So I would say early on buying the office is really learning the business piece. It's one thing when you're seeing someone else do it and you're learning from them, but really being in the trenches with it. I think one of the hardest things for me was, as an owner, you're not just the clinician, you're the leader of the practice, right? You're making the hard decisions. And sometimes those decisions you're not used to making. So sometimes you have individuals that just don't share the same vision as you, and you have to be able to sit down and have that conversation to part ways. That was something for me that was really difficult early on, because I'm a very, very optimistic and happy individual. And it was hard for me to have those difficult conversations because I felt bad having a conversation where I really had to let somebody go and they were not happy about it. But I learned from that. And I think that really helped me to be able to take that skill set in one practice and expand it to others. Now, there were things that came up as we grow to more practices. I think I learned the hard way. You should always prepare for any situation to arise. Strange things happen. And definitely throughout my career, I've had fluky things that'll happen, and you'll lose certain individuals that you thought you'd have with you forever. And then on the flip side, you'll have somebody walk through your door where you're like, where did this person fall out of? This is amazing. So I've learned that you just have to have patience and roll with the punches, and be positive and really motivate your teams and make sure that you have the right culture and mentality in your practices. And the way, I think probably the most important thing that I learned through the years, and this is really what I think has allowed our offices to be successful and continue to grow successfully, is bringing on the right people and hiring people with high character. Individuals can be really good at a job, but if they don't do it the right way and do it with a high sense of character, they're not somebody that I want on the team. And so we really look for people that embody that are happy, glass half full type people, and are doing it for the right reasons. And if you find those people and you can pour into those individuals and really let them know that they are a core piece of your team and your growth, I think those individuals stay with you for the long haul.
Yeah, I totally agree. You mentioned turnover, and that kind of leads to questions that's come in, like being in a private practice. Let's say somebody starts off with associate, they finally can buy the practice. As an owner with Aspen Dental versus maybe a private practice owner, what kind of support does an Aspen provide for you. Somebody also asked what a DSO is. That's just a dental service organization where we support doctors like Dr. Meckelburg in the practices, not owners, just all doctors. That's just what we're there for. But what kind of support do you receive from Aspen that's probably most beneficial to where if you were in a private practice, you wouldn't have that type of support?
So the list goes on and on with the things that Aspen does that I think if I was in a private practice, I'd be banging my head against the wall. But in particular, I think some of the things that helped me the most, recruiting being number one. It's a lot of legwork to be able to not just recruit doctors, but recruit hygienists, office managers, front office teams, lab technicians, dental assistants, hygienists, like everything under the sun, right? And so that's something that Aspen provides. Now they can do a lot of the legwork and line it up, but really, if you want your offices to be successful, I think that's something as an owner, you want to take more ownership of. You want to be a piece of those interviews. You want to be the one that kind of is making that final call on if that's someone you want on your team. But I think that's something without Aspen, that's a lot to take on, to try to get all those individuals lined up to be doing the marketing and advertising and all these different things that Aspen provides. It's a lot less of a headache for us, and it allows us to focus on the leadership pieces and the mentorship and really making sure that the experiences for our doctors is a huge positive as owners. So that's to me one of the biggest benefits. And then on top of all that, Aspen just gives you so many resources, and I'm still learning every single day. I'll come across something I'm like, I didn't even know we had this. How have I never used this before? From everything from payroll. So we don't have the headache of payroll, to HR. So if we have an issue with something, we call HR. Another one's risk management. So say you have a crazy patient that comes in the office and something wild happens, you get them on the phone and they'll talk you through the situation. That to me is so invaluable. Like there's nothing that I could have ever had anything like that in a private practice. And the thing that also is nice about that is one of the big pieces I think about is I like to think in the long term, right? And futuristic thinking. And what I mean by that is realistically, if I want to grow, I have to be able to scale. And if I want to be able to scale things, I need a partner as an Aspen, as a group that's going to be able to allow me to do what I enjoy to do and can do at a high level. And the things that would really be something that are foreign to me that I'm not comfortable with and would probably bog down most of my time, although some of them are inefficient, it would take away most of the time that I should be spending on other things. That's what Aspen can give you. And that's what that's provided for my offices and really made a huge difference.
Yeah, you've hit everything on them. I mean, everything that I tell students when I'm on in the clinics, and what the students is I tell them is that we're there. So I appreciate that answer. We're gonna get in, like we have time to talk about ownership, but a lot of the same questions are coming in is like how long is somebody going to be in an associate role, and then maybe what skill sets or abilities do you look for from your associates that let you know that they're ready to become your lead doctors or the next step after that possibly. So, be owning so many practices, how do you make sure that they're getting through the process, a mentorship and all of that?
Mm-hmm. So to answer your first question, how long are they an associate? I think that's completely dependent on them. Every doctor's different. I've had doctors that have been associates for years. And it's not to say that doctor couldn't be an MCD, but it might be something where they're not willing to relocate. They love the area that they're located in, and there's a lead doctor or a partner in that office. And so if that's the case, they may be in that associate role in that practice for quite a while, unless something changes or if a new office opens or if they're willing to move, right? But the main factor I would say that really determines an associate versus a lead dentist is, as an associate, really you're growing your skill set, your clinical base, right? And you're building that foundation. And I have associates, and I've had associates and do now, that are killer when it comes to the clinical portion. But that's not what defines, to me, a lead dentist in an office. And a lead dentist in an office has to have that clinical piece, because realistically, there's going to be times when the lead dentist may be the only the only practitioner in that office. They're the one that, if they have an associate, is bailing them out if they get into a sticky situation in a procedure or whatever it is. But the more important piece is that the lead doctor in that office has to inspire their teams, has to be able to handle difficult patients and be able to make difficult decisions, has to be someone that the owner can trust, that when they step out of that practice, it's going to be run at a high level. They're going to be able to drive results and also be able to take care of patients at a very high standard. So to me, the biggest difference between a lead doctor, or an MCD, as we call it, managing clinical director, and an associate, is someone that not only do they have that strong clinical foundation, but really they're someone that can take huge leaps and bounds forward from a leadership standpoint within the practice.
So on that next question, somebody did ask, and we want to be transparent. What does doctor turnover look like under you as an owner? Like, how hard has that been being an owner with, doctor turnover and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I can only speak for my offices. I can't speak for other locations. But that's something that I am really proud of. The doctors that I've had on our teams, for the majority of them have been with me for a good amount of time. I think they've done really well. And even the ones that have had to leave, it's never because it's a poor experience or anything like that. It's typically because there's extenuating circumstances, whether it be, family concerns and they have to move back to where they're from, or, they want to be able to grow and they want to be able to move somewhere else and be able to take their career to the next step. That's something that I support. And that's something that I want my doctors to be able to grow. And my hope is that really any doctor that I bring on, I don't bring a doctor on unless I think they could potentially be someone that I would want to partner with on the long run. And I think that speaks to the doctors that I would bring on, as I think very highly of them. And as an owner, I'm one that I like to be very particular with the individuals that I bring on my team, because to be fully transparent, as an owner, when you bring a doctor on, you're making a huge investment, not just an investment of your time, but also financial. And really, you want to make sure that you're bringing on the right person, not just somebody to fill a role in an office. You're looking for someone that you really could see yourself working with and having as a piece in your offices for years and years to come. And so there's a lot of questions that I ask when I interview candidates. I want to make sure they're someone that I will get along with, that we share our core values. There's someone that, like I had said initially, is coachable, but at the same time has, a sense of confidence about them. One of the big, things that I always say is I hire off of personality. I don't know what they're going to look like clinically, because obviously if they're coming directly out of school, which the majority of my new docs do, I don't know what I'm going to get clinically. I mean, I can ask a million questions, but really it's a matter of what do they actually show. But the way that I look at it is I can teach a clinical base. I have lead doctors that can teach a clinical base and really provide that foundational piece and help to grow new associates into really strong doctors. But I can't teach a good personality. I can't teach somebody that can walk into a room and their personality is infectious and patients love them. Like, that's something that you either have or you don't. And I can provide resources to be able to help really just make it that much stronger. But that's something to me that's really important. And that's really what I look for when I interview candidates is are they someone that I could build a foundational piece with?
No, I completely agree. So being an owner, you have 4 practices, a couple questions on ownership. How you decide, or how does Aspen decide, or how do you guys, the combo, decide where you're going to open these practices? And I assume these are, like, they're not existing practices, they're brand new. And I'll let you go over that. And then you mentioned 100% ownership. Somebody asked, does Aspen take a franchise fee or a percentage of procedures, or kind of get into that a little bit for the students?
Yeah. So kind of talk through both of those. So in regards to location, so for me, the first 3 offices that I had were existing practices that I ended up taking over one by one gradually. The most recent office that I opened in Destin was a de novo office. So essentially what happens was Aspen looks at different trade areas where they see a lot of foot traffic and they think they could open a practice, and they're going to come to the owners in that that market or the own, whoever's around that and say, we want to open an office here. Who's the best ready to open this practice? Who's ready for growth? Whose offices are at a high level of success? And then from there, it's a matter of opening that office. Now, in some markets, you may have an office and you're like, man, the demand is crazy here. We should open a new one. Tallahassee, for instance. So one of my offices right now, it's the highest demand market in the company. And so we talked about it for the last few years and we're like, we got to open another practice, maybe even more than another practice. And so finally it came to fruition, and now we're opening another practice there coming up in this summer. So that's a piece. They listen. And that's something that I think is really unique, is that it's a partnership with Aspen. The real estate teams and the marketing teams, they want to be successful, right? It's shared success. So if you have ideas, you just simply bring them to them, and they're going to tell you based off of what their recommendations would be from the data that they have, whether or not they think it's a good idea. But majority of the time you kind of get together with them and you find that common ground and then make the move from there. Second half of that question you had asked about, really just kind of talking about the compensation piece, or what in particular?
Yeah, like, so you're buying, like, you're becoming an owner. What does that look like? Are you paying Aspen a certain percentage of your production or fees, or how does that work to become an owner? Like, where does the funding come from?
Yeah, so full transparency. Realistically, those services that were being provided, we are paying for. I mean, it's a joint effort, and that's a really unique thing about it, is that to basically break it down, essentially you have your overall production for your office, and after you will have your overhead expenses and things like that, we get to a bottom line, and at that point, that's where Aspen's going to take their percentage, which is half. And so essentially Aspen gets half of that, and you would take half of that, and then you would pay out your doctors. So realistically, the positive to it is that it really is a partnership, in the sense of everything that you put into your practice. If you're buying a new, X-ray unit, or you're having to do something with one of your chairs, you have to replace a chair in an office, or an autoclave or something like that. It's a shared expense. So Aspen realistically is paying for half, and you're paying for half. So that's something that's kind of unique. It's also something that, to me, I thought was kind of interesting, because although you're paying half as that fee, you own 100% of the office. So you have full autonomy. So that's a big caveat that I do want to outline, that is very unique to Aspen, that other DSOs do not have. And that is, you own 100% of the books and the patient base in your practice, right? So you make all autonomous calls on anything happening from a clinical standpoint. Aspen has no say in that. You realistically, there are things when you buy an Aspen practice that, yes, there are some rules and regulations. I can't take the sign down that says Aspen outside and put my name across it. It's not like another dental practice. But to be honest with you, with the marketing and the different things that they're providing, I wouldn't want to. It's unlike anywhere else in the sense of patient demand. So case in point, we talked before about my Tallahassee office. Nowhere else could I open a practice and have between 45 and 50 new patient calls a day. Nowhere. Aspen has provided that. That's something that's so unique. The marketing and the advertising, they have specialists that are doing this at a very high level, and they're being efficient in the dollars that you're spending on your marketing and advertising, versus us, in a private practice. A lot of times it's taking on newspaper ads, or throwing a billboard up, or sending out flyers. Aspen does those things, but they do them at a much more efficient level and at a larger scale.
No, I think that's great. You open in a second office in Tallahassee. We just opened a second office in Gainesville. So when the demand reaches a certain level, it's not about you as an owner coming to them. They're probably knocking on your door saying, hey, let's do this. Are you interested? So, we're thinking a couple steps ahead. So it's funny you say that. Well, I mean, we can talk about ownership all night, and we're going to get to a few more questions, but I have a question, and I wanted to, a lot of the students ask me for career guidance, like what do owners look for? This question came in also as a third-year dental student. What is the best time to reach out to owners in hopes of meeting them and shadowing them?
My suggestion would be get into an office sooner rather than later. So I think, like I had mentioned before, really figuring out if Aspen's going to be a good fit for you. The first thing to do is get into a practice and see if it is something that you feel like you'd be a good fit for, and vice versa. It'd be a good fit for you. Not everybody is meant to be an Aspen doctor, and it's okay. I think that's an important point that I do like to make, is that it is a fast-paced environment. We don't have times in the day where we kick up our feet and just kind of sit there and wait in between patients and don't do a whole lot. Like, it's your go, go, go. But I think there's a lot of benefits to that as well, especially early on in dentistry, is that you're growing your skill set. You're seeing a lot of patients. You're also able to really be able to push yourself because you have a support system in the practice. You have a lead dentist in the office with you. So, if you got into a sticky situation, you get stuck in an extraction, you can't get a tooth out, you have someone there that's going to be ready to help you get out of that situation. So I think that's a really big piece as well. The other thing that I would just really highlight that I think is unique is that coming out of school, especially as you're coming out from school and the world is your oyster. I mean, you could do anything you want. Some words of advice that I give any doctors that are D4 graduating is enjoy the time after you graduate, because it's some of the last few weeks, months that you have of just laying back, relaxing, enjoy it. So take it in. But I would definitely say, like, make sure as you're a D3 going into your D4 year, or you're a D4 on your job hunt, make sure wherever you end up, it's somewhere with a mentor that genuinely has mutual interest with yourself and their business. And what I mean by that is it needs to be someone that's going to pour into you, not just to be able to get you to do a bunch of fillings and crown preps and extractions, but to pour into you because they want you to be able to grow in your career. And I think that's something that to me is very important with doctors that come onto my team, and why I'm so selective is that I do truly feel like it's an experience like no other. I feel like I want to give them the ability within a very short time frame to be very confident in their skill set, to be able to pour into them and make sure that they feel great about what they're doing and their growth. And then ultimately, my hope is that they find value in what I'm giving to them. And ultimately they grow into a lead dentist and possibly even a partner in my offices, which is kind of what we're talking about now with multiple of my lead doctors, and bringing them on so they have a piece of the pie and they have ownership in the practice. But ultimately I also respect it as well, and would cheer them on if I have a doctor eventually that decides they want to be an owner and own multiple practices. I'll be their biggest cheerleader, wanting them to be successful and rooting them on. So I think that's the big piece to me is finding someone that cares about your success and not just their own.
No, that's great advice. And that kind of covered, I wanted to know kind of what students should ask in the interview process, but I think you covered that. So we have a lot of questions, so I'm going to go straight into the Q&A and try to get to all the questions.
Rapid fire them at me.
Yeah. So this is a good question. As a 4, almost 5 practice owner, how does Aspen help promote work-life balance for you and your other doctors? Seems like it could be rather difficult with many offices.
Yeah. I think for me, Aspen gives a lot of resources, like I was saying before, that I wouldn't be able to do it without. If I were sitting at home having to do payroll every night or staying at the office until 8 p.m., 9 p.m., I would just burn out. And instead for me, what it allows me to do is it allows me to focus on what I enjoy the most. And that is spending time with my doctors and my patients and my teams, building them up, allowing them to grow, pouring into them, and making sure that they are all aligned with not just the vision of the practice, but also what their vision is, like making sure we're aligned together. And that's something that Aspen has really helped me with and giving me the ability to do. And I think that being said, I can be efficient with my time, which allows me to also be efficient with being able to be home and spend time with my 10-month-old son and my wife and our puppy, and like just spending time together. Like that to me is what makes it. Obviously we do what we do for our families. At least speaking for myself, like that's why I want to work hard. That's why I want to grow, and it's to provide for my family. And so I think that as much as I love my teams and being at work, and we really do make it a work family, we do a lot of stuff together. Ultimately, having a good work-life balance and being able to be efficient when you're in the offices is what leads to you being able to be home and have a lot less stress on your plate and being able to enjoy and do what you want to do with your family.
Yeah, he has a beautiful, beautiful son, guys. So, get on Instagram and check him out afterwards. Beautiful family. But couple questions are similar. Does Aspen Dental have contracts? And then what do you start or what do you pay your associates? And then could you go, I guess, open up a private practice and still be an owner with Aspen? Like, is there an exclusive non-compete or anything like that?
Okay. So we'll take them one by one. So let's do, first thing I would say is, there are not specific contracts. They're called letters of agreement. So the best way I've always described it is a good old fashioned handshake. And that is, I'm trusting you and you're signing this document that is basically saying, you're going to agree to these terms. You're going to come and work in my office. These are the things that are going to happen. Like, I'm going to be very clear and transparent as to what my expectations are, so on and so forth. And it's clearly outlined with everything. Obviously, there's some nitty gritty to it when it comes to, how much am I paying of malpractice insurance or things like that, right? But the majority of it's not a specific contract, which is unique because a lot of practices will require you to sign a contract with a non-compete. That's not how it works in these offices. Heaven forbid, I hope it doesn't happen, but like if somebody decided, you know what, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore. There are some guidelines that they wouldn't be able to pull patients or staff members or things like that. But if they wanted to open up a shop across town, they technically could do it. Now, as an owner, it gets a lot more sticky. As an owner, there are contracts. And what I mean by that is you're signing an agreement to join and purchase an Aspen office, right? So I cannot own another private practice if I own an Aspen location. There are non-competes. So those are some things to take into account. But I think that it goes hand in hand with, if you're not 100% sure that Aspen's the right fit for you, I would never suggest to own. I would never suggest to pursue that. And Aspen's also very selective in who they allow to be owners, especially in markets that are strong markets, because they want to make sure it's the same thing. It's a marriage. It's when you're going into an office and pouring yourself into it, you're really figuring out, is this the right place for me? Is this the right setup? And Aspen's figuring out, like, is this an owner that's going to be making the right decisions for our company? And so if it's a mutual thing and you both feel it's right, then you pull the trigger and you get married essentially to the company. And realistically, you kind of run from there.
Great answer. This question is an interesting one. Where do you have a certain number in your head of kind of where you want to stop buying practices, or do you want to keep going until, reach some of, I heard 29 or 33, some of the owners own in some areas of Aspen, but where do you see yourself ending?
Something I learned from one of my biggest mentors, and it's someone I look up to, is it's more important to grow at a high level of offices than grow in a horizontal, just general gist of offices. And what I mean by that is I would love to grow as much as I can grow at a high level, and allowing me to continue to have a good work-life balance continuing to allow my practices to run at a very efficient and high pace and high level, and also allowing me to be able to provide those resources that I'm looking to provide to each of those locations. I don't think there's specifically a number for that. And as long as I can continue to do that at a high level, I'll probably look to continue to grow. But I also never want to hit a point where I can't give each one of my offices adequate time for myself. I don't ever want to get to that point where I feel like I'm neglecting any of my doctors. I'm really involved in my offices. And so really my growth is going to be dependent on, one, partnerships. So I think that's a big thing, finding doctors that I really trust that I can partner with. And then two, really figuring out logistically, like where I can get to and what I can do and what I can provide to my doctors, where I'm not going to see a drop off in the quality that I'm giving them.
Yeah. I think you should keep going, because you do a great job in that community for me and, all my students. So keep going. So let's say, you're rather young. Let's say 20 years down the road or 30 years, however long will you get to have you as an Aspen Dental owner. If you decide to retire, what happens to your practices? And then you mentioned earlier that you heard 50%, Aspen gets 50% of production. Is that right? And kind of go over those two questions.
Yeah. So first part of that, the retirement piece, I haven't thought about it too much yet, but I do think there's some unique ways to go about it. So technically, you could do a few different things. One would be you could sell to other individuals that are within the Aspen company. So say there's another owner that wants to move to the area and buy a pocket of your offices or buy all your offices or whatever it is, you could do that. You could partner off the majority of your offices and sell them the majority stake or whatever it is. You can pass it down. So technically, if you wanted to pass it down to a family member, just like you would a private practice, you technically could. Or you just kind of tap out and sell everything and right off into the sunset. So there's a lot of different approaches. There's not a specific one that you would have to take. I think the one thing that Aspen would just ask is that when you would get to that point, and again, I haven't been there, so I don't know exactly how that would look, but I can imagine it'd be something that Aspen would want to make sure that doctor that's taking over the offices is someone that's going to be able to keep them at a high standard. That's probably the input that they would ask, and it is a partnership. I would expect that, if I ever sold my offices, we poured a lot into those. I wouldn't want to sell them to just any random person. I'd want to make sure that it's someone that's going to take care of these patients and take care of my teams and my doctors. And I think Aspen's probably looking for the exact same thing. And then your second question about the BSA, or the basic business service agreement. Yeah. So basically it's half of the bottom line. So what I mean by that is you have your overall production of the office, your gross profit. Then you're going to take out your expenses. And so once you take out all your expenses, not including doctors, you'll get to basically your net profit or your net revenue. And then from there, that's where the BSA agreement they would take 50% and you would get your other 50%. And then from there, you'd pay out your doctors, and the remainder would be what the office is take home pay for the owner.
And then how does the pay work for associates? A couple questions on that. Is it based off production or collection, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's essentially the best way I would describe it, and it's a lot easier to write it on a piece of paper and show you, but the best way I describe it is that's one of the things I love most about Aspen is it's very team oriented. So everything in the office for doctors is based off of a percentage of the average of the net revenue and the deposit. And what that means in deposit is much different than collections. So collections, if you do a $100 procedure and that patient pays $70, your collections is 70%, right? Your deposit's a little bit different. Your deposit is whatever money gets put down in the office over the counter, right? So deposit can actually be higher some months than what your revenue is. And what I mean by that is if you have great acceptance on big cases, so you have a lot of patients coming in and they fall in love with you and they're like, you know what, I want to do all my treatment with you. And they put their money down for their cases, which is in my offices, we require in order to schedule. So they make that commitment financially, and the deposit goes towards that month. You may not do that procedure for another month or two, but the deposit will go in that month, right? Then on the flip side, the production, whether it was from a month or two ago or this month, that production averaged, so whatever you produced or the office produced, I should say, average with the deposit brings you to that top line number, right? Now, the key here is that it's the overall office. It's not just one practitioner. So there's no competition amongst doctors, whether it's the lead doctor, the associate doctor, the hygienist, the oral surgeon, the endodontist, anybody that comes in and practices in that office, it's working towards that top line revenue, right? So the average of those two, you're going to take out financing fees. So we provide, care credit, things like that. So the financing fees will come out, and then you're going to have controllable expenses. So you're going to take out anything that as an associate or a lead doctor in the office, you have an influence over. So dental supplies, dental assistant wages, lab technician wages, lab supplies, the basics, anything under the sun that you have a say in, right? And does not include rent, doesn't include advertising, marketing, things that really you don't have an influence over. So you take out those expenses, and then it brings you to essentially your associate gross profit. From that number, you will then get a percentage of that. So throughout the company, you will see different owners offer different things. The standard across the company is usually 8 to 10% for associates. So what that is basically 8 to 10% of that associate gross profit you would then be eligible for. So we're going to make up round numbers to make it easy for everybody. So say that bottom line number that I'm talking about is, we'll just say 200, and you're eligible for, we'll say 9%. 9% of 200 is 18. Now that 18 is what you're eligible for in total. So hopefully everyone's following me. So we're at 18. That's what your total compensation will be for the month. Now, the easiest way to explain this is if you're at that 18 and your daily rate, so what you're paid on a daily basis is essentially adds up to 14. The difference is paid out as what's called a profit share, or in other words, it's a bonus. So essentially your total monthly compensation is based off of the entire pot, not just what you produce. So it's a very unique way of doing things. And I actually like it a lot because it creates, like I said, it allows for camaraderie in the office. It allows for doctors not to be competitive with each other. Instead, they're motivating each other and they want to work together to be able to produce what they can at the top, because it positively impacts everybody. And acceptance is a huge piece as well, because that realistically affects your deposit. So making sure new patients have a good experience. So that's kind of the brief breakdown of how compensation works. Associates are 8 to 10%. They're based off of the patient satisfaction score. So that's another key piece, is it's not just about generating revenue in the office. Our patients having a good experience. So we give our patients a survey after they leave, after their new patient appointments, and actually after any appointments, and then they give us their feedback. And so that is a sliding scale for that 8 to 10% based off of their feedback. It's the same for MCDs, or managing clinical directors, lead doctors, same thing. Theirs is typically 16 to 20%. So it's different everywhere you go. It's different with how many doctors are in the office. So if you have a 3-doctor office, it may be different percentages, as I have in one of my locations right now. But that being said, pretty standard across the board that 16 to 20 and that 8 to 10 is what you're going to see.
Thank you for that explanation. Yeah, it's easier. I'm going to send out an email with the recording so guys can review this. If you want like a paper breakdown or a little sheet we've put together, I can definitely email that out. But we have time for 2 more questions and then we'll get to the raffle. So let's say we have, Aspen provides specialty of endo and oral surgery. Someone asked if you have an associate that likes doing endo, or or difficult surgery, would Aspen ask him not to do that since there's a specialist coming in? And then what types of CEs would associates, get their first year out of practice? Like what are we investing in when CEs and continuing education for them?
Mhm. So the first part of that question, no, I actually love it when my associates want to grow. I want to be able to give them the resources to be able to do whatever they're passionate about. Now there's certain things that we'll provide the resources for and kind of point them in the right direction as to why or why not. I may take on certain cases. Um, but I would never discourage someone from taking on a case from the sense of if they feel like that's something they're passionate about and they want to learn more about it and they want to challenge themselves. So I think that's a big portion of it. Just because we have specialists doesn't mean that you can't do those procedures. Now you have the specialists to lean on, and they're typically offices are, at least I can speak for my own, are very busy. And so it's less about wanting to do those and more so, can we be more efficient with our time? The way that I look at it is what's the best thing for the patient? Do I want to put a patient through a 2.5 hour molar endo that a doctor's going to do as an associate, or do I want to have them have a 30-minute experience with an endodontist? It's not something I'm going to tell them they explicitly have to do, but I would give my feedback to that doctor saying, you feel you do what you feel is best for the patient. And so I think it's something that if you can grow your skill set and you can learn from those specialists, then continue to pursue that. The second part of that question was what, Will?
CEs, like what do CEs look like with Aspen, particularly as an associate coming out of school? Like what are we trying to, I guess, give them clinically wise?
Yeah. So there's a couple big company initiatives across the board. So obviously you have your foundational pieces, which you're going to learn in the practices, typically with the lead doctors and the mentors. You're going to learn a lot about the basics, restorative dentistry, crown and bridge, surgery, the core foundation, right? Removable pros, all that sort of stuff. But then from there, really hammering into the new realms, and that would be like ortho. We do a lot of clear aligners in our offices. We have our own clear aligner brand called Motto, which is kind of our version of Invisalign. The unique thing about it is that we actually do something called dental monitoring. And so we can actually track patients from home, which is really unique. And it allows a lot of patients to want to do it with our offices because then they don't have to come in for a million visits. So that's just one of the many things. The other piece is implants is a big focus for us. So something I'm super proud of. I have 4 docs that are in my recent group of new grads that are coming in and growing in the offices I have right now. All 4 of those doctors, by the time the summer hits, will be completely implant trained. So they'll be placing implants in the offices on live patients, doing everything. Now, they're going to have lead doctors. Most of them will have lead doctors with them. Majority of the time they're doing these cases, so they have support. But that's something that I think is really neat, is that these doctors are 9, 10, 11 months out of school, and they're going to be placing implants and doing it at a high level after going to training, which majority of them are going up to Chicago. We have Aspen has its own unique training system for that. It has its own courses. There's courses in Mexico, Alabama, all over the place. So there's definitely no shortage of CEs. And it really is just what you're passionate about. If you love endodontics, there's ways that they can get you involved in endo. If you love oral surgery, there's courses they can do, more with the surgical background in. So it really just kind of depends what your cup of tea is.
That's great. And Doc, I appreciate it. I didn't know you had 4 grads that would be placing implants from their first year. So that's something we may reach out to you and get them on these calls just to kind of explain that journey, because that's something that we discuss a lot with the students. So I want to give you a round of applause. Thank you so much for the hour. It flew by. Thank you guys for all the questions. I'm going to reach out tomorrow, send you guys the video. If you guys have any other follow-up questions, I'll try to get you guys Dr. Meckelburg's information. Last thing I need from you, Dr. Meckelburg, we're going to give out 5 gift cards. I got how many people are, so I need the first one. I'm going to need 5 numbers, but the first one is 1 through 18.
Oh, number 7.
Okay, that's Alyssa Parker, and I will be reaching out to all the winners tomorrow. Okay, and then 19 through 37.
Let's go with 32.
Elaine Wang. Okay, 38 to 57.
How about we go with 54?
That's Caitlin Lee. 58 through 72.
Let's go with 62. I feel like I'm picking the Powerball right now.
Yeah, Newton Perez. And then 73 through 88.
Oh, I got to go with my college football number, 87.
Yasmarie Santana. So I will reach out to you guys tomorrow to get information on getting you guys your gift cards. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for joining, and be on the lookout for the next virtual session, which will be next month, with more info to come on that. So Dr. Meckel, have a good evening. Everybody else, enjoy the rest of your evening, and you guys have a good night.
Pleasure. Thanks, Will. Take care.
You too.